Right. So, good evening and welcome to Stage 501. We're back again this week and we have an interesting topic for you as usual. This topic, of course, being the upcoming elections in the United Kingdom. So, events happened. I think we can say it's a couple of days ago now, 2 days ago, roughly speaking. And there were polls taken as a result of those events. And as you know, it was the BBC debate between Jeremy Corbyn and Boris Johnson. And some surprising and some not surprising results came out of that, although neither of the sides did anything particularly egregious that was any different from what was expected. So it was a relatively tame debate, but with somewhat shocking results. And we're just going to use this stream to go through, what we've learned, what could possibly be happening, and the potential future of the British left in the case that things don't play out the way that we expected they would. So there are many people talking about how when we first were going into this election, that since Boris Johnson was the Conservative Party frontrunner, he was going to do lots of stupid things. Let's be frank. We're going to be completely frank in this stream. That he was going to do lots of stupid things, and that this would result in Labour being able to gradually overtake them. As we can see from the polls, this has not played out in precisely that way, and I'm thinking that there needs to be some analysis of why that is taking place. So we're on the introduction, so we'll just introduce who we've got with us here today. Although this is already put out on Twitter with the list of people, we'll just introduce you all anyway. So we've got Chris, Hara, and Romeo here with us, and we'll just introduce them in that order. So Chris, go right ahead.
Yeah, so I'm Chris. I'm just your hodgepodge, secular, stoic, anarcho-suckdem, libertarian, federalist, utilitarian, humanitarian syndicalist.
Gets me every time.
I know,
I
right?
love it.
Basically, when you're so centrist that you're kind of like on the ascended tower in the middle of the political spectrum.
Yeah, or you could say left,
Or
center, left.
to be most clear.
Yeah,
I mean,
left, center,
you
left.
think of center left. Okay, Hara, go ahead.
Oh, I thought Romeo's next. Oh, I guess I owe you a proper introduction for once. I identify as an anarchist communist, and my favorite topics are mental health, identity politics, and all sorts of dramatic things.
Okay, no, well done. That's a good introduction. And so we'll also introduce Romeo. So give us your introduction.
Hello, my name's Romeo. I should really think of a proper introduction next time, since Chris has me beat.
Yeah, honestly, Chris has us all beat, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I mean, well, to be fair to him, he's probably just reading it off of the bio of his own Twitter account at this point.
That's exactly what I'm doing.
There you go.
I honestly thought you had it memorized. Holy shit, here I was impressed.
Yeah, no. Who memorizes things anymore these days? Except me. So, going forward, where is I'm just joking, obviously, but we should start with the most controversial thing that has emerged out of these conversations, which is the documentation which Jeremy Corbyn produced, which purports to show, according to him, that there is a plan existing somewhere that involves trade deals post-Brexit in the United Kingdom, involving letting American firms run hospitals, as opposed to National Health Service doing this in the way that it ordinarily would do. So, an increasing privatization process apparently, and this apparent privatization process would allow Donald Trump's America to have its firms buying their way into a National Health Service.
I just want to comment that this is kind of clever because, technically speaking, the U.S. can already bid for NHS contracts, but now specifically, every time like that happens, it'll just get brought up.
Yeah. And so it's like, I mean, particularly the way that they've gone about negotiating this. I mean, or they purport to have negotiated it, because obviously I can't say for certain what they're going to do. But this is a sort of thing where ordinarily it would be electoral fireworks. Now, what Boris Johnson has been doing is he's been going around saying that this is all a conspiracy theory. So, for example, on the 3rd of December, he actually sat down on a couch on one of the ITV sets and literally leaned over and said, "This is UFO stuff." And by this, of course, he means that he thinks that the British public is willing to believe that this whole idea is a conspiracy theory. That's what he's trying to claim. And he's been consistently doing this. Every single time Labour will bring this point up, he'll say this is a conspiracy theory, or he'll compare it to aliens or something. Like, if it's a complete joke and somehow it's not going to happen. So we went through what they're looking at, and it's like there's only a couple of lines in the documents that Jeremy Corbyn produced that actually make any reference to this. But if you follow them back to what they're referring to, then suddenly you have an entire vista sort of opens up before you, and then you're able to find out what it is they're talking about. And so what they're actually talking about is conversations which Boris Johnson and others at the time, Liam Fox and what was the guy's name again? Daniel Hannan, had with various people at something called the Initiative for Free Trade, or also known as IFT, and I'll continue to refer to it as IFT from here on in. And if you go backwards, you'll find yourself reading an article in the Sunday Times from 19th of September 2018, which was written by Oliver Wright, and it's behind a paywall, but don't worry about that because, I mean, when you're talking about me, I'm always behind the paywalls. So I'll just bring it up and we'll just read through. And then you guys can kind of get an idea as to where they're going on this. So just give me 1 second. We'll see if we can actually bring this up. Right, so we're going to share the screen.
No screen sharing.
Yeah, it's totally there right now.
Damn it!
Okay. So with that done, I'm just locking that into place so everyone can continue to talk, but it won't take it off the screen or anything. So looking at this, so obviously you can see we've got Daniel Hannan at the top here. And the title is Let American Firms Run Hospitals, Urges Free Trade Group. Now, the way that this was done is this was really smuggled in, because when you think about free trade, you don't necessarily think that it's going to involve this specific topic. And so that's how they're able to really package this thing in. And it kind of, and I just want to go on a side tangent here, just a little bit, because free trade is actually good for people. We know this. I think everyone on this panel here agrees that free trade is actually really good because it allows people to receive products at the kind of prices that you ordinarily would not be able to get them at if you tried to somehow have everything done in one place. Because of course you've got you're able to source from places that otherwise you wouldn't have access to. I mean, it's just quite obvious. We don't need to go through this. We've been on this a million times before. But when it comes to something like this, when it comes to the health service, no one is thinking that that's what that involves. And it kind of tarnishes the appearance of free trade when people go around doing this. But we'll go down anyway, because I said I was going to read the article. So here we are. So ministers should allow American healthcare companies to compete with the NHS to run hospitals as part of a free trade pact after Brexit, a think tank recommends. The Initiative for Free Trade said that Britain should also end its ban on imports of products such as chlorinated chicken and accept American environmental and food safety regulations as equivalent to those in the UK. The moves, it claimed, would help clear the way for a UK-US trade deal that would, quote, rewrite the rules of global commerce and allow Britain to take advantage of trade freedoms offered by Brexit. The IFT has received backing from Liam Fox, the International Trade Secretary, and Boris Johnson. The report, edited by Daniel Hannan, a Tory MP, was partly written by the trade lawyer Shankar Singham, who has been consulted on free trade by Dr. Fox, David Davis, Steve Baker, and other ministers since the referendum. Its conclusions will fuel suspicions that the think tank is being used as an outrider to align Britain with America on standards to secure a trade deal that would not be possible if the government signs a Chequers-style agreement with the EU. Now, what are they referring to here when they say Chequers-style agreement? And I'm sure you all know, but I'll just say it anyway for the benefit of the audience. The Chequers-style agreement would have been the kind of agreement that Theresa May was intended to negotiate the 3 times that she attempted to, and none other than Boris Johnson prevented it from occurring. I wonder why. We continue. The report, which was published simultaneously in London and Washington, was a collaboration between the IFT and the libertarian US think tank, the Cato Institute. It calls for Britain and the US to negotiate the most ambitious agreement ever that would allow British and American companies to compete on a level playing field in each other's markets across both goods and services. Both countries should accept each other's regulations on safety and environmental standards and open up all government procurement contracts to both sides. Now, just another sidebar here. I find it interesting that it's phrased in this way, when we actually know that in this scenario, the United Kingdom would not be the rule setter, but the rule taker. In other words, everything would be reduced to American standards. This deal does not involve forcing Americans to step up to the standards that are used in the United Kingdom. Of course, getting the Conservatives or Boris Johnson to actually admit to this is kind of like getting blood out of a rock. Which obviously, you know,
can I mention
rocks don't
something?
bleed, so...
How are you going to get this kind of deregulated free trade deal if the first thing the EU are going to, if you're going to have a trade deal with the EU, they're probably going to insist on level playing field standards.
Yeah.
So it's like they're prioritizing a US trade deal first.
Well, I mean, America's number one. So.
All hail America!
I mean, this is how dumb it is, and this is why when Jeremy Corbyn accused Boris Johnson of basically just working for the US, I mean, it sounded sensational at the time, but it's difficult to understand what other way you could rationally look at that from.
Well, you know, US is number one, so that's all I can say. You know, USA.
And so it continues on down because they're not yet finished. So both countries should accept those regulations, environmental standards, blah, 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 blah. It also suggests that any British or American citizen should be able to work in both jurisdictions if they have secured a job. It is the group's proposals to open up the NHS to competition that is likely to prove the most contentious. Daniel Ekenson, one of the report's editors, described the NHS as an incumbent healthcare provider that should have competition. Quote, "The purpose of liberalising trade is to expose incumbent businesses to competition, including healthcare providers," he added. A Department for International Trade spokesman said, "We are currently seeking a wide range of views about 4 potential free trade agreements, including with the United States of America, and we encourage all interested organizations and members of the public to make their voices heard through our online consultations." Right. So, of course, obviously, we know that didn't happen. What instead happened was it kind of got swept under the rug because they invited a minimal amount of press. And then when it did have press, it was placed behind a paywall. And then a year later, during what is objectively a rapid fire snap election called by Boris Johnson, the topic has now come up, and now people are starting to find out what their original intent was.
That he apparently didn't want, despite begging for it 3 times.
Yeah.
LOL.
And so, yeah, he came out and he's like, yeah, we don't want any of these things at all. It's never happening, except for those times that we asked for it. And then you've got, a bunch of people who are walking around actually believing that Boris Johnson's words. Now, of course, if we go back in time a little bit further, let's go back in time a little bit further. If we go back to the administration of Tony Blair, right? During the administration of Tony Blair, Boris Johnson, during that time, actually called for the NHS to be functionally abolished. It's just that everyone actually forgot he did that too. And I think that the main thing about the Boris craze is you have to forget.
Ironically, that was when he was the MP for what's his name? Heseltine's seat, Henley.
Oh my gosh, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you remember that, and it's very good that you remember that, but I think that the majority of the country does not even remember that incident occurred.
Yeah, a lot of people forget that he was the MP for Henley, and I think he had a minor shadow cabinet role in when it was Michael Howard, the leader, I think. So yeah.
There was also a video of him quite long ago as well, where Johnson apparently appeared and claimed that inequality is essential for the spirit of envy, or something like this. And he was, I guess, making what he viewed as being a pro-free market argument, right? And it's one of those things where it kind of cuts against this one nation conservative talking point that Boris has been bringing for the past, let's say, 6 weeks or so. where he'll keep coming out there and he'll be like, "Oh, I'm a one nation conservative," and each
Except
time he
that-
says this, it falls flat because of the fact that anyone who has a memory that goes back greater than 6 months remembers that Boris Johnson arrived and removed from the cabinet every single one nation conservative that existed.
Yes, I was gonna mention that. Like 6 senior Thatcherites are in his cabinet.
Exactly.
Like
So, like,
all
how
you
one
needed
nation is
was
that?
Steve Baker,
Exactly.
who apparently turned down a job as housing secretary.
Exactly. So it's not even that Boris Johnson didn't want him; it was rather that Johnson wanted him, but he didn't want to be there. Which is just truly ridiculous, right? So we're supposed to believe somehow that that's a one-nation conservative cabinet that he's assembling there, which contains no one-nation conservatives. And of course, obviously, we need to define this for our audience because some of our audience do not know what one-nation conservatism is. So one-nation conservatism was an idea originally created by Benjamin Disraeli, and the idea is that there are two nations in the United Kingdom. One of them is called rich people, and the other one is called not rich people. And the idea behind one nation conservatism is how do you create a social and economic order which prevents uprisings from below by satisfying the demands of those who are less well off so that there can be peace and harmony in the country, which, depending on how you look at it, that's either a good or a bad thing. Like, if for revolutionary socialists, that's probably not the best possible thing you've ever heard of. But I mean, if we just look at it objectively, that is what he is claiming to be. Okay. And then if you actually look at his record, there's nothing in his record that would seem to suggest that he actually cares about the working class or appeasing the working class in any way whatsoever.
But he's
Yes.
quirky. And that's all that matters to Boris.
I mean, this is where it is. Basically, he's like, oh yeah, but it's, he's quirky, right? So no, Chris, you're making a great point there. That part of this whole appeal that Boris Johnson has been involved in does involve basically him acting like a buffoon, and that appearing to be attractive to some voters in some way. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in a second as well.
To make a U.S. analogy, I think the one nation conservatives are more like the Rockefeller types, while what we would call the Thatcherites are basically the generation that was brought in by Margaret Thatcher and by extension Churchill. Because remember that during the 1940s, the Conservative Party swallowed up the Liberal Unionists, which were the liberals that were against Irish Home Rule.
Absolute
Yes.
crickets, literally.
Because there was
changing something.
Because there was a split between the liberals, between those that supported home rule for Ireland, and then the ones that didn't. So they split, and the liberal unionists just merged into the conservatives.
And you're saying that became part of the faction that was One Nation? Is that what you're saying, or the opposite?
No, the opposite.
Okay,
the
opposite.
very pro-business types.
Of course. When you say liberal in this context, of course, you mean the usual. Yes. That makes complete sense.
Gladstone liberals.
What a
damn liberals.
No, quite seriously. I mean, one day we need to do a live stream on this. If we need to actually look at the Irish famine objectively, and you will discover a lot of things about British liberalism that you won't like.
It all traces back to Ireland.
Yeah, I mean, everything. To understand the United Kingdom, almost everything takes you back to Ireland.
Yeah, that's why I want, that's what I got out of that show on Netflix, Dairy Girls. That's pretty much the whole thesis to that show is everything's Ireland.
So I have a question as an outside perspective, Boris.
Okay.
How long has UK Donald Trump been around?
Oh, he's been around a long time. Very long time.
He's very well known.
Since the 1990s. He was a writer for which newspaper was it? Not newspaper,
The
which
Spectator,
publication?
I think.
The Spectator, wasn't it? Right. So he wrote for the Spectator in the 1990s. Wow. His negative comments about women that have been dredged up recently.
That's
the ones where
so
he referred
interesting.
The ones where he referred to single mothers in that derogatory way. That's from an article he wrote for the Spectator in 1995. So he's been quite bad for quite a long time.
That's interesting because I can't speak for all Canadians, but where I live specifically, like, unless I went digging and researching for myself, I've never heard of Boris.
I didn't hear about Boris until 2012 for obvious reasons, because that's when
I
the
didn't
Olympics
hear about
was.
Boris till literally this goddamn year, and only because apparently he's the UK Trump.
Well, that's because you don't watch sports. If you watch sports like I do, you would have learned about him in
Sports? Are you kidding? I
2012.
watch the Puppy Bowl every year. You don't know me.
Yeah, but you didn't watch the 2012 Olympics. That's where I learned about him, when he got stuck. That's all I remember from him, is that he got stuck. He was dangling up in the air.
Yeah, I remember the first time I've heard of him was with the EU referendum, which if you actually take a look at that campaign, he's being accused of being a grifter, of basically like writing 2 articles and then picking the one that's politically most convenient for him.
Yeah,
It's
that
in I haven't read the book, but it was in a book that David Cameron recently wrote.
yeah. I just thought he was weird when I saw him in 2012 during the Olympics. That's where I first got my weird
Was
vibes
he
about
in
him.
the Olympics?
Unofficially, yes.
He was mayor of London, and London hosted the Olympics.
Did he do a sport?
Well, he tried to, like, I think it was like what a zip line or something like that. It was either parachute or zip line. I don't know. He was trying to do something to enter.
It was a zip line, and he was holding 2 British flags, and then he got stuck halfway.
When I saw that, I thought, wow, this guy is probably conservative trying to look cool. And sure enough, I was right.
LOL.
That's why people should watch sports. You miss a lot of politics if you don't watch sports.
That's why you should invest in sports, because political information, ?
It's pretty funny. Okay,
It's
so
insane.
Hold on. Oh yes, because we were just actually referring to this single mother commentary that Boris Johnson made a while ago. So I'm just going to quickly show that so that people can get an idea of what we're talking about here.
Boris was like, all poor people are alcoholics, and
that's included. He's going to mention this. Yes.
Oh, good.
So
good.
Hold on 1 second.
Oh, Chaz was. That's what he was. What he talked about.
I mean, Boris has like a lot of contempt for working class people. It's just, of course, working class people seem not to be aware of this fact for some reason. So let's see what we do.
Oh, I don't think we could play clips, but do you know the clip from Have I Got News for You, where they confronted him on apparently being asked by someone else to help him beat up a journalist?
Yeah, that was a thing that happened.
God, what?
I'll just quickly read this out. So hold on 1 second. Right. So this is from The Independent. So Boris Johnson said children of single mothers were ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illegitimate in a newly unearthed column. Boris Johnson described the children of single mothers as ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illegitimate in a newly unearthed article which Labour has claimed shows the Prime Minister's dark age attitudes toward women. In a column written for The Spectator, the Tory leader said it was outrageous that married couples should pay for the single mother's desire to procreate independently of men. And he suggested that it was, quote, feeble for a man to be unable or unwilling to, quote, take control of his woman, end quote, arguing that Britain needed to, quote, restore women's desire to be married, end quote.
What? Boris is an incel.
Yes, he is like the original.
Wasn't he divorced at the time? At the time he wrote this?
Huh? Say again?
Wasn't he single at the time he wrote this?
He was indeed.
Oh!
Shami Chakrabarti, Labour's shadow attorney general, accused Mr. Johnson of attacking single mothers and advocating sexual harassment in the August 1995 column, unearthed by the party's researchers as the general election approaches. The Spectator's archives show Mr. Johnson, who went on to edit the magazine, described the offspring of single mothers as ill-raised, ignorant, aggressive, and illiterate children who, in theory, will be paying for our pensions, end quote. Suggesting swinging cuts to benefits to tackle teen pregnancy, he wrote, quote, "It must be generally plausible that if having a baby out of wedlock meant surefire destitution on a Victorian scale, young girls might indeed think twice about having a baby, and yet no government, and certainly no Labour government, will have the courage to make the cut to the safety net of the viciousness required to provide anything like such a deterrent. For the reality surely is that 9 times out of 10 these girls will go on having babies out of wedlock, not because they want to qualify for some state handout, but because in their monotonous, depressing lives, they want a little creature to love," end quote. So this is like some, I don't know, some kind of like deep lore level stuff going on here. Anyway, we continue. Quote, "Feeble and unreliable men were more to blame for the problem than, quote, uppity and irresponsible women," end quote, he suggested. The article is not the first Spectator piece that has led to the Prime Minister facing accusations of sexism. Okay. In a 2001 diary column for the same publication, Mr. Johnson also covered a range of topics, including what he said was the large number of attractive women he had encountered at the Conservatives' winter ball. He wrote, quote, "There is one measurement I hesitate to mention. Since the last time I did, I am told, the wife of the editor of The Economist cancelled her subscription to the Daily Telegraph in protest at my crass sexism. It is what is called the Toto-meter, the Geiger counter that detects good-looking women. In 1997, I reported, these were to be found in numbers at a Labour conference. Now, and this is not merely my own opinion, the Tories are fighting back in a big way," end quote. Fionn Haig, the wife of William Hague, set his and others' Toto-meters, quote, "squeaking away like crazy," end quote, added the future Prime Minister. In a third article from 2005, Mr. Johnson described life at the Spectator offices in his final contribution as editor, offering anecdotes and advice. Following a wistful description of a nap on a comfortable sofa, he writes, quote, "You come around in a panic to find a lustrous pair of black eyes staring down at you. Relax, it is only Kimberly, with some helpful suggestions for boosting circulation. Just pat her on the bottom and send her on her way," end quote. I know. You all are speechless. I'm almost speechless also, but we'll get to that in a second.
This is
I am
very
pretty
sexist.
speechless.
Yeah, I mean, it's insane. We continue. Baroness Chakrabarti claimed the 2005 article, while tongue-in-cheek in tone, effectively advocated workplace sexual harassment. Quote, "Someone whose attitudes toward women are straight out of the dark ages is not fit to be Prime Minister," she said in a statement on Wednesday night. The Independent has contacted Mr. Johnson for comment. Challenged previously on other controversial articles, such as his description of Muslim women wearing niqabs, I'm not going to even bother to quote that, he told BBC Question Time special last week, quote, "I have written many millions of words in my life as a journalist, and I have generally never intended to cause hurt or pain to anybody." Except he's lying, of course, because his name is Boris Johnson. He opened his mouth,
His name.
he eats hot chip, and he lies. So, we're just gonna... Yeah. It's I mean, this is ridiculous. Have you ever heard of someone
Or
who's
is
running for
he
high
hot
office
chip and lie? No.
behaving in this way? I mean, it is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it?
How did this not come up during the leadership election?
It did.
Wait,
Jeremy
it
Corbyn
did?
actually asked him about this on stage at least one of
No,
the
no,
debates.
no, no,
I'm
no.
absolutely sure of
I
this.
mean, during the Tory leadership election.
During the Tory leadership election.
Yeah.
Just no one cared. No one looked it up. I don't know. I mean, it's entirely internal to them. I mean, they have 200,000 people, most of whom are, I think their average age is something like 76. So, I mean, they probably remember it. They probably just don't care also.
They're just a bunch of old racist people, and they wanted an old racist person.
Sounds like Canada.
It's very weird. I mean, that whole selection process that they had on the inside of the Tory party, very strange. And it's one of those things where you can't even join it and kind of like entry it and try to steer it in some other direction because there's 200,000 of them and only a few of anyone else. And so you'd think, though, that once these things get out and the electorate becomes aware of them, that it would actually work against him. You would be surprised.
Well, Britain is just a country of very unusual people, to put it in the
I think
most
it's just that it got
non-derogatory way.
memory hold because at the time this came out, most of the debate around the election was over the NHS,
Uh-huh.
and and the trade document that got released on Reddit, apparently.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, there was a redacted version that was published on Reddit, but I can't substantiate that. The one that that Corbyn held up in the first debate.
Yes.
Yeah, that was apparently posted on Reddit.
Oh, yes. No, I saw the thread. I saw the thread that was posted in. Yeah, someone posted it on Reddit, basically, and that's how it kind of got circulated around. Also, it was being it was being presented to a number of people about a month beforehand, and people just were, ignoring it. So, if you go through Twitter and you actually look for the link, you can actually see that there are people actually posting it toward various figures. But I think only Jeremy Corbyn looked at it.
Huh.
Which is kind of weird. But I mean, yeah, that whoever the leaker was, who had that document, they were deliberately trying to show it to politicians. It was also
it could also be about
apparently
timing.
offered. Yeah, it could also be about the timing, but I mean, it was also offered to the media ahead of time as well, but the media also did not use it.
Damn, shit's getting heated in here.
Yeah.
Ew.
The real question is how does Jo Swinson feel about this? She's irrelevant.
I can actually show you. Let me just see if I've got that here somewhere, because it's bad. I mean, Liberal Democrats
they've had a terrible campaign.
Yeah, but I mean, aside from that, they've been calling for this whole thing of you've got to engage in tactical voting. And of course, obviously, if the objective is to keep Boris Johnson out of office, tactical voting is the best way to accomplish this. However, the Lib Dems are quite changeable on this issue. So Sam Coates had a tweet that came out that I thought was quite interesting, that I will go over and show you guys now. And we'll see, or you will see, because I've already seen, but you will see just how bad it actually is, because Liberal Democrats do some amazing things, and you almost want to make one of those, those in the 90s how they used to have those weird TV shows like Kids Do the Darndest Things and stuff like this. And
wait, are you gonna mention the
VHS videotapes of absolutely stupid things occurring? This is kind of like that, except the electoral male version of this. So just give me a second.
The bar charts?
No, it's not the bar charts, but we'll get to that.
Just like an image of North Korea. Only the Lib Dems can win here.
Well, don't forget
the Lib Dems can win here. I mean,
don't forget the austerity
with an orange
with
an orange bar graph.
With an orange bar graph. I mean, literally, you can just put it anywhere. You just have a map of Alabama or something. Oh, yeah, the Liberal Democrats can win in this location. So
I don't know. The Lib Dems.
My other favorite
I don't even think
was,
Alabama would want them.
My other favorite meme was during because Beto around it. How do I say this? The news that Beto O'Rourke was apparently going to drop out. Someone said, "Oh yeah, he's defecting to the Liberal Democrats as an MP."
Yeah, that is amazing.
Because at the time they were unveiling a slew of MPs that apparently defected to them.
Wow.
Most of whom probably won't win back their seats.
Well, just hold on
rough
1 second.
over there, buddy.
Yeah, just hold on 1 second, because we're gonna go to a screen share and I'll show you what it is that's going on with these guys. So, application window. Right, what have we got? There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to read what Sam Coates is saying directly, because at this point, why not? This Lib Dem leaflet suggests that Joe Swinson will, under all circumstances, stop Jeremy Corbyn from becoming Prime Minister. This suggests 1. The Lib Dem MPs would be prepared to vote to install Boris Johnson in number 10. 2. Stopping Corbyn is actually more important to Lib Dems than a second referendum. Now, the significance of this is that the whole reason for the Liberal Democrats' existence at this point is supposedly to prevent them from being is to advocate for a second referendum on Brexit. Except when it comes down to like class interest getting in the way, then suddenly it's like, yeah, but you got to stop Jeremy Corbyn, it would appear, according to them. So we'll just read this. So as you recall, there were a number of Conservative MPs who defected to the Liberal Democrats recently, and so Dr. Philip Lee is one of these individuals, and so I'm just going to bring up the copy of his letter, which is going around. So that should be displaying on screen like about now. So I'll read it out for you just in case it is too small to be seen. So, Dr. Philip Lee, who was a Conservative MP from 2010 to 2019, but is now a Liberal Democrat, writes as follows.
But is now a Lib Dem.
And of course it's addressed to the individual on Twitter. So the individual's name is apparently
I'm Joe Biden, and I am now part of the Green Party.
He's running for John Redwood's seat, not his own seat, just to be clear.
Yeah, and he's not running for his own seat. He's running, of course, for John Redwood's seat, as you said. So he goes on. So it's personally addressed to the individual who is apparently Henry Newman. And so he writes, can you imagine waking up on Friday, 13th of December to find out Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party has won in your area? You can make sure this doesn't happen by using your vote carefully in this election. In seats like Hampstead and Kilburn constituency, the choice is between the Liberal Democrats or Corbyn's Labour. Just a few votes could decide who wins. The Conservatives can't win in areas like these. Cue the graph of North Korea. By lending your vote to the Liberal Democrats.
Oh my God! You just stepped over a line. Oh my God!
By lending your voice to the Liberal Democrats, you can stop Jeremy Corbyn and his extreme left-wing policies. The Liberal Democrats will stand up for what's important in communities like yours. The Liberal Democrats will stand up for our NHS and work to make our streets safer. See, this is the part where you're supposed to forget that austerity ever happened. Okay, continuing.
Wait, no, before you continue, random fact. Isn't it true that, random fact, as I ask if it's true, isn't it true that Corbyn, since his, I guess his joining or whatever of the Labour Party, hasn't like the Jewish phobia or whatever you call it going on went down actually and such?
I don't know any of the statistics on that.
That's something we have to talk about.
And we haven't even reached that topic.
Okay, I'll look for those while y'all chat.
Okay, so we continue on. So Philip Lee continues, we will oppose any attempt to install Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister. This is a vital election for our country and your vote can make a crucial difference. Lend your vote to the Liberal Democrats and together we can stop Jeremy Corbyn. With best wishes, Philip Lee. And then he goes, and then of course, not to be outdone by his own self, he then has a postscript. P.S. Remember, in areas like yours, only a vote for the Liberal Democrats can stop Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party. Make your vote count on Thursday, the 12th of December. This is just so classic, is it not? After all of that, these guys are also sending out like contradictory messaging because obviously some of their letters say the opposite of this. So I think they've got this down to one of those targeted things that they do.
I think it's kind of their strategy to target conservative Remainers at this point. But the problem is they also pull Labor Remainers as well. So it's just really weird that they're framing this as an anti-Jeremy Corbyn vote.
They're just ultimate centrists. That's what they really are. They're the ultimate centrists.
It's like when
just can't have any beliefs.
And also,
it's like when you've reached that level of centrism, it's like what else? What even is left?
Also, since the Lib Dems are made up of a substantial number of defectors like Philip Lee and Chuka Umunna, would we really expect them to put Jeremy Corbyn in power? Given, he left.
Exactly. Many of these people left the Labour Party to join the Liberal Democrats, literally because of the fact that they think Jeremy Corbyn is too far to the left for them.
Yeah, I saw
However,
a great
it's very
meme.
revealing that they'd be willing to do anything to stop Jeremy Corbyn, but not so much for Boris Johnson.
I saw a great meme that summed up the Lib Dems. It was that I don't know if you've ever seen The Simpsons, but there's this Lionel Hutz episode where Bart and Lisa are going to go hire him, and he had to revise the business card. So the meme is, Labor Party or Lib Dem Party saying like, "Oh, we support the working class and no right wing politics," and then he corrects it to, it's Joe Swinson in the meme. She corrects it to, right wing politics, basically no, comma, right wing politics, and like adds a question mark after support the working class. So to say we don't support the working class and right wing politics is what we want.
Yeah, I mean, liberal Democrats are something else.
Yep, they're at least American libertarians, at least they have beliefs. They're bad beliefs, but at least they have beliefs.
And then, of course, you had the recent thing with liberal Democrats pledging. What was that pledge? It was something about 1% of something. Does anyone remember what that figure was? Where they pledged to constrain spending.
Always run a 1% surplus.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
Year
always
to
run
year.
a 1% surplus. Now, of course, obviously translating that into actual functional reality just means infinite austerity forever. Does that not?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, like, when a liberal Democrat's going to admit that they're still trying to do austerity in, the 2019th year of the Common Era, like, this whole thing started in 2009, 2010-ish. And
At
then,
least
no, go on.
At least John Redwood and Dominic Raab are apparently at risk of losing their seats to the Liberal Democrats.
I suppose, but I mean, well, maybe
that's just a local
exactly.
thing.
It's one of those things where I suppose them being replaced by a liberal Democrat would be interesting because I guess liberal Democrats don't have like completely backward and ridiculous social views, so it'd be kind of like
they're much more palatable in Surrey, I guess.
Exactly. So you'd have at least some socially progressive values to come with your austerity.
Yeah, but I mean, they're no better than American libertarians, where you basically, they're better socially, but their politics are still pretty garbage.
Yeah,
sounds about right.
Worse over time. Now, speaking of which, where are we going to go after that? Because there was more to be said.
Also, just one more thing on the Lib Dem thing.
Okay.
During the Tony Blair, Gordon Brown era, they were actually trying to make themselves appear as being on to the left of the Labour Party. It's interesting that now they're trying to make themselves look more fiscally conservative than even the Tories.
Yeah, I'm wondering if I wonder if it's a case that they've kind of like found their constituency after having gone through the vicissitudes of the coalition era, and the fact that the left-hand side of their former voting base may not have ever forgiven them for what they did on the tuition fees thing, among other things, such as being in coalition with conservatives in the first place. It's now reached a point where it's all they've got left, so they have to appeal to it, right? I mean,
if you ask me who are their base, I can't even respond.
I can guess who their base is, but
it used to be students, but not anymore, I guess.
I mean, probably. I mean, I don't know. They're very similar to American libertarians, so I know who their base is. But given how different UK politics are, I can't imagine why people in the UK would support them.
Not to ring this home, but apparently their membership during the summer it grew, and so the median age actually increased. So this means that
older people.
And the context was really terrible because it was during the Andrew Neil Joe Swinson interview, where Andrew Neil asked her, if you only return with only one more MP than you did in 2017, will you resign? And she said, she gave the Gerard Batten response of, well, it's not about the amount of MPs we've got. The membership, it's growing.
LOL.
Yeah, she literally gave our membership's growing. we're thriving right now.
So what's next? Are they gonna go get Count Dankula?
No, I don't think that anyone
How
associated with
dare
people who have those kind of views. Speaking of
They
which, though, I
didn't
mean,
they get a Rachel Johnson for the EU elections?
I have no idea who that is.
Boris Johnson's sister was an MEP candidate for them, I think.
oh, really? I didn't even know that.
No,
Which
never
is
mind.
incredible.
It was the Independent Group for Change.
Oh, right. Okay.
I mean, basically the Lib Dems.
Yeah, because they all became the same people in the end, anyway. So it's absolutely just. Voters are obviously not going to be taking Liberal Democrats seriously at this election.
It's just absolute rubbish.
It's just amazing that at the beginning of the election she was like, "Oh, I am your next candidate to be prime minister," and now she's only going to get 14 seats.
I think the Lib
Two
Dems are
more
proof
seats
that
than
libertarians in
Tim
America will
Farron.
never go anywhere because, say you feel about America, but at least America is smart enough to not put people like the Lib Dems in power. That's why the Libertarian Party is completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
I think also a problem with them entering coalition is that they were technically seen as like a protest party. So what happens when a protest party just like enters government?
Yeah, and I think that's why the Libertarian Party in America will never go anywhere. That's me being American-centered because America first. Not really.
You fucking son of a bitch. You know what?
No, I'm just
I'm
saying.
unfollowing you on Twitter. That's it.
LOL.
Ugh, rat.
Oh, crap.
Yeah. Never say those words back to back.
Yeah.
What,
I don't
unfollow on
actually
Twitter?
care about America first. I'm not the most up to date on UK politics, so I'm just kind of
Yeah, Chris, why didn't you use visual quotations for us?
Okay,
How
but
dare
anyway,
you.
we're going to go on to the next thing that I want to tackle now, which is that the debate that happened just a while ago. So how long have we been? Yeah, we've been on the street for about an hour now, so we're doing pretty well, given that we have probably about half an hour left until we reach the end. Because obviously we don't want to drag this out until it becomes unlistenable. But
LOL. Do the
basically,
smokers get a break? Do the smokers get a break?
oh, do you want to do you want to break until before we go into this part on the debate?
Sure, if that's okay with you.
Okay, we'll take a 5-minute BRB.
5?
break,
Okay,
right?
give me 7 minutes. Give me 7. At
Do
least 7.
any of the listeners want to wait that long?
That's
Okay,
not an
fair.
even number.
All right, just for you, precious listeners, I will run and risk my physical health.
I mean, it's the inside of your own house. You can just smoke in your house. You know this, right? Anyway.
I can't smoke in my house. There's children in here.
Oh, wow. Okay,
They can
fine.
a little cancer never hurt children.
Yeah, a little bit of secondary smoke never kills a child.
Okay, no. Obviously, on a serious note, yes, be responsible. Do not listen to me.
Yeah, and don't listen to me either. Obviously,
Exactly.
don't. Secondhand smoke is bad, and
Exactly. Do
don't
not
give children
suggest
cancers.
secondhand smoke.
Be a responsible adult, unlike Boris Johnson.
Yeah,
If you're not straight edge,
we'll actually wait. We'll wait the full amount of time for you.
Cool.
We'll wait the full amount of time for you. So we'll wait 7 minutes. Okay, so 7-minute break, everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
I will run. I'll miss you, audience.
Okay, so we're back again, and we're going to resume from where we left off. So, when last we spoke, just before this break we just came back from, and people went and they smoked as they needed to.
Wow, you are such a what's the word? Ableist or something because I smoke. Wow.
I'm not against people smoking if they want to.
I'm calling the cops.
Oh my gosh. Anyway, so we are going to deal with the counterintuitive and strange poll figures that resulted from the debate. So, I mean, just for perspective, we've been going over in the previous hour. We had been going over all of the things which make Boris Johnson absolutely deplorable. Now, I don't think we've done like a comprehensive sort of full spectrum coverage of every single bad thing that Boris Johnson's ever done, or anything that you would think would play badly with the electorate. But we've probably done enough, and those who are watching this stream probably know well enough the kind of person that Boris Johnson is by this point to realize, just how cringy his premiership would be, and has been so far in the 3 to 4 months that he's actually been Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. So, given all of that, one would think that Jeremy Corbyn would have an easier time dealing with Boris Johnson. You would be wrong. So I'm just going to show some statistics here, some of which were posted on Twitter. So, for example, Sebastian Payne from Financial Times has an interesting one that he's put on Twitter. So I'm just going to bring that up for you all now. Right, so here we go. So, apparently, despite everything, Jeremy Corbyn is the most unpopular leader going into a general election since records began. And this is, of course, via Ipsos Mori. So, as we can see here, I'm sure you all can actually see my mouse on the screen here, and I'm circling where the Corbyn dot is, which is somewhere around minus 43 or something like this. So, below the bar, negative 43. And so, by comparison, Margaret Thatcher was at like about positive 9 in 1983, whereas Michael Foot was at like minus 40. Now, of course, Michael Foot was at minus 40 during that time period, not just because of the fact that Labour was struggling at the time with their management of the economy, but also because of the fact that many people believed that Michael Foot was actually a KGB agent working for the Soviet Union. So that would contribute to a negative 40 or negative 39, as I can see here.
The Soviet Union could do no wrong, though.
Really?
Because like Stalin is like
it was pretty awful.
Really hot.
So, hold on. And so basically, Michael Foot had an approval, had a satisfaction of like minus 39. Corbyn, by contrast, in the year 2019, in which none of these tropes are actually in play, and so he can't even be accused of these things because the country that he'd be accused of collaborating with doesn't even exist. I mean, he's still
didn't he get accused of being a Czech spy?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, they did accuse him of being a Czech spy, which, of course, again, it's 2019. The state they accused him of spying for doesn't make then either. So, a further comparison, Neil Kinnock. So, obviously, in 1987, we see Thatcher here at positive 1 and Neil Kinnock at minus 30. Corbyn is still less popular than Neil Kinnock was in 1987, which you'd think would be impossible, but apparently not. And then in 1992, Neil Kinnock on like minus 8, and Corbyn, again, just for reference here, minus 43 in the year 2019. How is that even possible? So this is Kinnock on his second attempt, and Corbyn is still less popular than that. And then, of course, you've got Tony Blair at positive 22, and John Major around that time, who was seen as largely corrupt and needing to be thrown out of office. He is about minus 28 there.
And crashing out of the ERM.
And crashing out of the ERM. So even in the midst of financial chaos, at a time when John Major was seen as being broadly sort of an avatar of corruption, and he was on his way out of office and about to be replaced by Tony Blair. In 1997, John Major was at minus 28, whereas, again, just for reference, Corbyn is at minus 43. So Corbyn is almost twice as unpopular as John Major was after John Major had finished doing his havoc actually in government. Bear in mind, Corbyn has not actually been in government yet. and he's already less popular than John Major was at the end of his government.
But leftism never works, so we must never allow it to be in power, as it never has been.
I mean, this is crazy, right? But we go on because we're not even finished. So, I mean, we have to go through each one of these comparisons because in order for people to understand just how manic this is, you have to describe the scenario. So, we've also got here 2001. So Tony Blair here on like -2, and William Hague at like -29. So of course, the reason that William Hague was at -29 in 2001. Well, do I actually need to explain that? I mean, it's William Hague.
Yes.
Do I?
Hello?
Okay, William Hague is a dork. Simple.
Is that all I need to know? He's a giant whale's penis. Is that what you're telling me?
It's all you need to know. So,
did you know that a dork is a whale's penis? This is very
granted, all three leaders during that time.
Very important.
Say again?
Granted, all three leaders during that time were kind of bad. Ian Duncan Smith, Michael Howard.
Sounds like a reasonable stance I'm willing to agree with, despite not knowing shit.
And then we go on. So the year 2005, John Howard. I'm just thinking about Australia for some reason. Michael Howard of the United Kingdom on -10. So of course, Michael Howard was somehow actually in 2005 more popular than Tony Blair, which I'm not sure how he accomplished that, to be honest. But so Michael Howard on -10, and just again for the record, Jeremy Corbyn on -43 in 2019. So Jeremy Corbyn is somehow, what is that, 3 times less popular than Michael Howard. But anyway, we go on. So Gordon Brown, after having been in government for a long time and people were getting annoyed with him, he was on -25, it looks like here, which is, of course, still more popular than Jeremy Corbyn apparently is now. And then, of course, in 2015, it was David Cameron versus Ed Miliband, and Ed Miliband was less popular. And, of course, we all remember the iconic photograph of Ed Miliband walking forwards while kind of turning toward the camera and reaching back to put 2 pence into the cup of a homeless woman with an expression on his face that looked like he didn't want to be anywhere near that situation. And it was horrendous. Like, it really looked quite bad. And so if you remember that photograph in your brain when you're thinking of Miliband, and then you think of like how unpopular does a person become when they're twisting around toward the camera and putting 2 pence into a homeless person's cup in order to attempt to appear compassionate, but everyone can see that it's actually 2 pence. And you've noticed that the cameras are there, and that is why you've suddenly twisted around in this kind of bizarre way to make sure that you remember to put the 2 pence into the cup. This produced a scenario in which Miliband was on -19. Now, again, for reference, in 2019, Jeremy Corbyn is at -43. We continue on. I know, right? You're thinking, is this rational? But we continue. So then in 2017, with Jeremy Corbyn versus Theresa May, Corbyn was at -11, and Theresa May was at like -9. So, interestingly enough, Jeremy Corbyn from 2 years ago was 3 times as popular as he is now, according to this apparent data. So, if Jeremy Corbyn were to run against himself in 2017, he would defeat himself. It's kind of like one of those Legend of Zelda things or something where you're fighting against Dark Link, and yourself is just
well.
Anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that. So anyway, Jeremy Corbyn now versus Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson at -19, and Jeremy Corbyn at, again, -43. So what's going on here? Why is it that British people, when presented with this situation, why is it that it has resulted in this occurring? What is going on? Is it the media? Do you think it is the media?
I blame society. Whatever it is.
Society. We live in a society. So let's see if we can actually find out where the British people are actually getting their news from. Maybe that would give us some idea as to why we're seeing these bizarre results. Because I literally can't imagine. I'm saying this rhetorically because, of course, I know the answer actually. But, it becomes difficult to imagine how it is that someone who's saying such positive messages that Jeremy Corbyn is getting out there and saying every single day can come in and be the most unpopular politician like ever. So let's take a look. So
no, what if we don't want to take a look?
British people are getting their news apparently from 47% say they're getting it from TV news, 35% say they're getting it from radio, 34% say they're getting it from newspapers, 25% say they're getting it from social media. And you'll notice that Jeremy Corbyn is significantly more popular on social media than he is anywhere else. Political radio/TV programs, 5 to 6%, which, if you think about it, is quite stunning. And podcasts, 2%. So we're just going to scroll down. So you can kind of like look at the graph. In fact, I'll click on the graph. There you go. That should make it easier to see. So you can actually see who has like a couple times a week, for example, or who has never, etc., etc. So if we look at people who never do things, only 7% of the country say they never use television news. 18% say they never use radio news. 20% said they never read a newspaper. 36% claim they never use social media to find out about political stuff.
Sounds like really old people.
Yeah, 47% said they never use political radio programs. Am I reading this correctly? Because this is looking kind of worse than I thought it would be.
So it looks to me like it's probably old people that like Boris.
Maybe.
And because it would make sense that old people want that.
Sense. Yeah, because it would make sense because that's the only place that seems to be that. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. And so 28% said they never use political TV programs. 66% said they're never reading political magazines, print or online, and 72% say they're not listening to political podcasts. So
wait, how did they answer this then?
Oh, because the pollster YouGov would have.
Oh, okay, I thought this was like an online server. I'm like,
no,
wait a goddamn minute.
Online surveys are not reliable for anything.
Exactly, online surveys are not reliable.
Excuse me, all surveys are biased.
But a good pollster tries to eliminate the bias. You know, like just looking at the fact that there's 2,662, that right there, you have to have over 1,000 for it to be accurate. So
yeah,
there's things that a pollster can do, Hara, to make sure that this is pretty accurate. Because I know that because I listen to the podcast of a person who's a political scientist. So
I mean, relatively decent. So, I mean, if we look at this sliding scale, it just basically means that most people are getting their stuff from television news, according to this particular poll. And it would totally make sense then that activities going on television would dictate the way that people view things. So if you have a news cycle that's continually coming up with increasingly wild ways to claim that Jeremy Corbyn is really awful in some way, then one would expect that this would eventually play out in terms of
I hate Corbyn because he doesn't want people to starve to death.
Yeah, I mean, this is the absurdity of it. I mean, I even saw some political programs on the BBC News where they went around and were asking in like deprived communities a number of questions on how people are approaching the election. There were some people who didn't understand the politics of what was going on, and so they didn't understand like who the characters were and how they're playing against each other or whatever. And then some of them who did understand gave completely ridiculous counterintuitive responses that didn't appear to make any sense. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? So one of them was where someone went to a food bank with a camera and microphone and basically started interviewing people who were at the food bank. Okay. Now, these are obviously places with extremely deprived communities with people who don't have very much money at all and are suffering as a result of austerity and the policies that were implemented during that time period, which are still overhanging and carrying on. So, people were understandably upset at the situation which they have been plunged into. And they actually managed to find several people who, despite admitting the reality of the deprivation that they were in, nevertheless, at the end of the conversation, still said that they were voting for Boris Johnson, but could not present a reason for why they were doing so.
That's wild.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we've seen this in 2016 before as well. Just with the whole Donald Trump phenomenon.
Well,
Except this time around, it's actually even more irrational because the people who are doing it can't even supply you with an argument. So it's like you can't meet them on some level and say, okay, well, here are the ways in which you've misunderstood this and you are wrong. Because while you can do that with Trump supporters and say, okay, this is what Trump says, this is not actually true, and your interests are not being served by this. In the British equivalent with this with Boris, the entire thing seems to exist purely in the emotional domain. So it's about like feels over reals, basically, with these guys. Feels over reals for the right wing. And so how do you argue against their feels on this?
Yeah, I mostly agree with that. I mean, I will say one thing about the Donald Trump being elected is that while Donald Trump did weaponize the media and hog the spotlight and stuff like that, Hillary Clinton did make a few missteps in her campaign that allowed Donald Trump to win. I mean, there was a lot of luck involved with Donald Trump winning, where not showing up to Michigan or Wisconsin was a really bad move.
God, honestly, was there a difference between Hillary and Trump? I'm like,
Yeah, there was
any fucking different in power right now.
There is. I mean that I will say, Har, that
respectfully, I would like to know your opinion, what the differences were, because I'm genuinely curious.
I feel like that would be better for its own stream, because I mean,
fair. We don't want to distract from.
Yeah,
exactly. We should not dabble into American politics.
You know what, Ray?
All I want to say is that the only thing I want to do is just nitpick Ray on the whole Donald Trump thing. But I mean, she's not entirely wrong, though. She is very right about the media and stuff like that. That's definitely a big thing. I just wanted to add a little nitpick that a lot of people always forget.
Yeah, no, it's no problem at all.
How dare you, Chris?
LOL.
And in fact, I think adding a nitpick actually makes the UK look even worse, because you can't. That's not even a factor in this election. With the American one, it was a literal fluke because of that little nitpick. But with the UK, it's like no excuse.
Well, I mean, wait until you see the next statistic I'm about to show you. The next set of statistics I'm about to show you. This one will really blow your mind. So hold on one second again. Right, here we go. So I'm just going to bring this up for you. Right. So, yeah. So discussion turning to billionaires at the BBC debate. We found earlier in the general election 2019 vote campaign that 51% of Britons say that no one deserves to be a billionaire, and that 79% support raising tax on billionaires, including 70% of conservative voters. So explain this one to me. 79% of people in the United Kingdom say they support raising the tax on billionaires, the same one that Jeremy Corbyn says he wants to do, and the one which Boris Johnson apparently does not want to do. 70% of conservatives agree that the tax should be raised on billionaires. Yet, these people still want to support Boris Johnson. Explain that. I mean, obviously, the explanation again comes back to the very same thing we're just talking about. This thing is not rational. What's happening here is feels over reals. So they have particular policies that they would like to see, but when it comes down to it, they would rather drink a beer with Boris Johnson than they would with Jeremy Corbyn. So it doesn't frankly matter.
Yeah, I will say this is definitely it's actually making Americans look at least more consistent.
Yeah, because I mean, at least
LOL burn. Oh my god.
No, I mean, it's not even a burn. I mean, it's just reality, right? That at least with the Americans in this case, they will provide you some kind of explanation for why they think that billionaires should be protected from taxation or something. They have some kind of ideological gloss that they want to present in order.
Yeah, it's even though it's silly, it at least exists. With here, it's like, wow, it doesn't exist, and then it's like, well, I don't want that guy who's supporting the thing that I support.
Exactly. It's absolutely ridiculous. So let me just see, what else have we got going here. Just after the debate had taken place, there were also findings, if you want to call them that, about how people reacted immediately to the debate. And of course, people's immediate reactions tend to be the ones that are really interesting just after a debate is completed. So I know that I have them here somewhere. I'll just quickly bring them up. There is the original. So it'll just take me a second to bring them up. If you guys are thinking of saying anything else in between, now would be a time to just give us some filler on that while this loads.
Everyone follow me on Twitter now.
I already follow you, but I will say, wow, I don't hate America as much. I now hate the UK more than America because the UK makes America look smart, and we're not smart.
Listen to me very carefully, Chris. England is the parent to both Canada and the US.
Well, clearly the parent is not.
We got it from somewhere. That's all I'm gonna say.
Well, they're not a very good parent. You know.
Also, I mean, I wouldn't be entirely
You're
hard
not
on
wrong.
the past and the future because
Oh,
of the fact that
quiet, you goddamn imperialist!
I mean, there have been times in which the British public has actually been quite intelligent in their electoral behavior.
Look,
this time around, I'm not sure that like actual thinking is occurring.
Every country has its ups and downs and all their rotten apples or whatever, but can we just all agree that white supremacy stemmed from England?
Yeah, for the most part.
On a bunch
For the
of
most
other places.
part. Yes. Yes, I know.
Europe in general has that.
But if we're not going too far back in history, like
I
let's
will
just say
all the world's problems are caused by,
most of them are Britain. Like
because Spain
when
Spain caused problems, Spain fell apart so that the problems they caused were somebody else's problems.
Pretty much.
Whereas the UK just said, nope, keep going and just keep.
Yeah, and the States is honestly just a younger, louder, and more obvious version, whereas Canada seems to be like the sneaky sister or something.
Yeah, we were loud and we take advantage of times when Europe is weak. When Europe is weak, that's when we strike.
And freaking proud.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why we were able to boost our manufacturing post-war is because we didn't have to rebuild like the way Europe did, so we cheated. That's why American manufacturing was so good post-war.
I have found what we were looking for now. So brace yourselves for this, because this one I think was probably the most interesting outcome out of all of them. So right, here we go. So we're just going to switch across, and then we're going to present to screen. Yeah. So get ready for this. Right, so Britain elects, and they're of course using YouGov data. So look very carefully. Who came across as more trustworthy in the BBC debate? Jeremy Corbyn, 48%. Boris Johnson, 38%. And these are people who are watching it on television live, of course. So let me go on down. Who came across as more likable? Boris Johnson, 55%. Jeremy Corbyn, 36%. So apparently trust doesn't have anything to do with being likable.
I mean, I guess Bush is proof of that.
And then we go down. Who came across as more in touch with ordinary people? Jeremy Corbyn, 57%. Boris Johnson, 29%. So clearly, Jeremy Corbyn winning on the issue of like who is in touch with ordinary people, unsurprisingly. So now prime ministerial means like, who would you be likely to elect? Because when someone says someone is very prime ministerial, what they're saying is that they believe that they could picture and imagine that person being in office and be willing to make that happen. So who came across as more prime ministerial? Boris Johnson, 54%. Jeremy Corbyn, 30%. So what we've learned from this is that being trustable and in touch with ordinary people is not required for being prime ministerial. All they want is whether the person is likable, because that's the only thing that lines up here. Boris Johnson wins only on being more likable, and by almost that exact amount, because he's only out by 1% on that. That is the amount of people who also think he's prime ministerial. Everything else doesn't matter.
So, random question: where's the other 16%? Like, where's that?
I think they're filtering out the don't knows.
Oh, okay, that's the don't knows. Okay, I mean, I don't care if they filter the don't knows. I was just curious if that's don't knows or if that's like people who are taking crazy pills or not crazy pills. I don't know. People who for some reason live in bizarre world where they want to go with Swinson, which I can't imagine that those people exist. I don't think they do, but.
No, because they wouldn't have been able to. In that debate, it was only Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn.
I know, but
so they had no choice.
But that's only if you're not following her Twitter. she was really big about I should have been there.
Oh,
even
right,
though
right, right.
she-
No,
Oh,
so maybe
yeah, I
it's not.
remember.
So maybe the
She
missing
sued.
people.
If only I had been there.
Maybe the missing
That's-
people. Hold on. Maybe the missing people in that case are don't know / decline to answer, because maybe there are some liberal Democrats who don't want to choose between the two and just decline to answer.
Yeah, because I just remember that was like the most comical thing, like her whining on Twitter about I should be there. It's like, no, you
I mean,
shouldn't.
a lot of pundits reacted to those figures as they came in with absolute shock, because again, this is the second time this has happened, by the way, and it's been broadly the same last time. And last time everyone thought, well, maybe that's a fluke because that looks really dumb. And then this time around, it's like literally the same thing again, where Boris Johnson wins on being more likable, but is seen as less trustworthy and less in touch with people by wide margins against Jeremy Corbyn. And then when it comes to the question in the end, like, who's more prime ministerial? They're like, oh, well, obviously Boris Johnson. Which is absolutely just like, what level of brain dead does a person have to be on to have actually answered those questions? And they're asked those questions in that order as well. It's not that they're asked in some strange order which then causes them to reflect on the fact that they've answered it wrong or something. No, they're asked the questions on the paper in that order. So when they answer it and they get to the bottom, it's, who do you think is more prime ministerial? So it's almost as if the voters who have been questioned in this case are consciously aware of what they are doing when they say that Boris Johnson is not trustable, he's not in touch with ordinary people, but he is likable and therefore prime minister.
I really, you know what I'd be very curious about? Only because I'm American. I'd kind of want to know what questions pollsters asked in 2004, because I know the big reason why George Bush got reelected and why he beat Al Gore in the first place is literally the whole, he's likable. I feel like I could have a beer with him. That's literally why he got elected. And I almost want to see that data to see if it is the same.
Well, I mean,
Just
it
out of
would
curiosity.
be interesting to see. I mean, but think about it this way: if you compare the substance of George, if you compare the substance of George W. Bush's campaign to that of Boris Johnson's, George W. Bush's campaign, I think, had actually more substance to it than Boris Johnson's had. That didn't George W. Bush run on like on saying things like he wasn't
Get
going to take
Brexit
people into
done.
foreign engagements willy-nilly anymore, according to him, and he also ran on Medicare Part D, saying that he was going to do some reforms to that, and there was the whole No Child Left Behind thing. So I think they actually did put in some effort to sell this compassionate conservative thing for George W. Bush.
Yeah,
Whereas
I
Boris
guess.
Johnson is doing none of this. Boris Johnson actually spent the entirety of the debate either on the defensive about bad things he's done in the past, or repeating the phrase, quote, "get Brexit done," end quote. He just kept saying that over and over again. So it's almost as though his campaign has like no substance whatsoever. Even his stuff on Twitter that he does with his sort of campaign materials is basically just Boris Johnson like standing in the street smiling at people or something. There's no actual concrete substance to it.
Yeah, I mean, well, he is the guy that in order to get reporters to not ask him questions, he insisted they drink tea, which was very smart, because the key was you should not drink the tea. But the reporters drank the tea.
Don't drink the tea.
Exactly.
I love you, man.
You're fun, Hara. We should
I am the
podcast.
funnest bitch here. You're lucky I'm here to make this shit fun. You're so.
Yeah, you got Ray and Romeo actually being serious, and we're just kind of goofing around.
No,
Throwing
no,
paper
no, no,
airplanes.
it's a good contrast because we're trying to get that balance anyway.
Yeah, me and Hara just
listenable
throwing
streams.
paper airplanes.
So I'm sure that Romeo has like a bunch of figures that he would like to bring up. If I haven't actually already been bringing them up, is that the case?
Where
Am I
do I
kind of
drop
getting
them?
on? Am I getting onto the ones that you're already doing? Send me them on Discord, and I'll bring them up and we'll see where
Okay.
we end up.
Give me a moment.
No.
Okay, yeah, no
If
problem.
you have 2 seconds to fucking do any action. Oh man, I need to lay off the booze.
I'm not gonna lie though, I am slightly impressed with how Boris Johnson's manufactured persona actually works. It's very surprising to me.
Yeah, because I mean, if someone told you outright that he was going to come on and basically just be a buffoon and this would result in victories, no one would have believed it.
Yeah, I mean, because
And
like
yep,
the thing
there
is,
they are.
Donald Trump's a buffoon, but that's because he's a buffoon.
He's a
Like-
damned goblin and a troglodyte.
Well, he is. He is, and that's what's like amazing is that Boris Johnson is playing the 4D chess that some conservatives who regret voting for Trump bought into, because there are people who literally thought that Trump's buffoonery was an act before they realized, oh, he
It's
actually is
not
a
an
buffoon.
act. They got suckered because of the fact that George W. Bush's buffoonery was an act.
Yeah,
And then they realized that, oh, actually, not everyone plays that. There are some people who are actually genuinely dumb.
yeah, like
And
Donald
Trump is
Trump.
one of them.
So it's scary that Boris Johnson's not dumb. He's just evil.
Yeah. Sad.
Yes, quite tragic.
Maybe
Check
maybe the
Yep,
your
I'm
Discord.
seeing the links you're sending in. So I'm going to talk about those now as well. So just hold on. I'm going to do one of mine first, and then we're going to do those two at the same time.
Mine first.
The reason for that is because they're connected in a way that makes sense.
I know. I'm just teasing. Come on, have a laugh. Tease back. Come on.
No.
It's
Okay.
so easy. I'm Banancom. Come on.
Banancom
Okay,
is that
hold on.
the banana
Banancom?
communist?
Banana com.
Did I seriously say Banancom?
No,
I
you
love
didn't.
myself. I love my. Shh. I did. Shh. Continue.
Okay. Speaking of the whole Boris thing, so you should be seeing on screen now. Note, this is Paul Brand from ITV pointing this out, and this is something that obviously needs to be pointed out. Note that they almost always say Boris and not conservative. Lots of voters in Matlock today told me that they don't really see him as conservative, despite the fact that he's been a Tory mayor of London, a Tory MP, a Tory cabinet minister, and a Tory prime minister. A clever illusion. Now, of course, obviously, Paul Brand believes is a quote clever illusion. It's not clever. It's just literally like 5-year-old child level stuff that somehow is actually working on voters. Like, how do you sort of exist as a conservative mayor of London, a conservative minister of parliament, a conservative cabinet minister, and a conservative prime minister, and then come around and when someone asks voters, "Do you really perceive this guy as being conservative?" They're like, "Nah, he's just Boris."
Boris will be Boris.
Boris will be Boris. It's just a complete accident that he's been a member of the Conservative Party and has written for conservative publications and has worked for conservatives and has held conservative positions in governments across the past 2.5 decades. Pure coincidence, right? Just coincidence.
But he got stuck on that zip line that one time.
He got stuck on that zip line that one time, but then he was a conservative during that time too, and he also happened to raise 2 British flags while stuck on the zip line. I mean, it's one of those things where I just don't understand how people actually what is going on in the brains of these human beings. So anyway, Paul Brand in his brilliant analysis here continues, if you want to call it that, already being dismissed because Matlock is in Derbyshire Dales, but these were lifelong Labour voters on the factory floor telling him that they will vote for Conservatives. Find ways to dismiss it or face it head on because Labour has 1 week left to change their minds. So again, this is one of those things, again, we've seen this in the United States before as well, where basically it comes down yet again to white working class males, let's say, exhibiting very strange behavior that we don't understand, and then we're somehow supposed to communicate with them and explain to them that 2 + 2 actually equals to 4, and that if you want sort of socially progressive policies to be put in place to help you and your family, then you need to actually vote for Labour and not vote for Conservatives, particularly if you yourself are a member of the Labour Party and have been voting Labour for eons. Why would you suddenly decide now that you want to vote for Conservatives because of Boris? It makes no
Because
sense.
he's so damn hot. You wouldn't get it.
Okay, now I see the American equivalent.
Exactly.
And so we continue on. Matlock is the nearest big town to the factory, but these are some of the smaller neighbouring towns and villages in the area. Worksworth is the closest of them. Every worker bar too told Paul Brand that they'd always voted Labour and they'd mostly voted Brexit. So they voted for Brexit because obviously there are some people who are Labour leave, let's call it that. But Paul Brand's sort of, let's say, anecdotal observation is that these people who have, quote, always voted Labour suddenly have decided that they are actually going to vote for Conservatives. And then when someone quizzes them, like, well, Boris Johnson is the Conservative and this is probably bad for you, then they've got all kinds of like weird statements they want to make, which is that they don't really perceive him as a Conservative, even though he literally is in every way and has assembled a Thatcherite Conservative cabinet. So there's that. And we will also have some statistics, some poll figures showing who people thought won the debate. So we're just going to do that quickly as well. Right, so I don't know if I've shown this before. YouGov Sky News snap poll on the TV debate. Leaving aside your own party preference, who do you think performed best overall in tonight's debate? Boris Johnson, 52%. Jeremy Corbyn, 48%. Now, keep in mind, during the entirety of that debate, Boris Johnson essentially said nothing. Like, he just basically just waffled. And yet, 52-48.
Interesting.
Incredible.
And so
yes,
we'll get to the figures that are being shown by Britain Elects here. Who performed the best during each section of the BBC debate? So on Brexit, people say that Johnson was at 62%, Corbyn was at 29%. On the NHS, Johnson was at 38%, Corbyn was on 55%. On government spending, Johnson was on 48%, Corbyn was on 43%. And on security anti-terrorism, Johnson was on 55%, Corbyn was on 34%. Now, bear in mind, this is the interesting points that I want to highlight here. On Brexit, the entire thing that Johnson did was he claimed that he will actually execute Brexit somehow by the 31st of January, which of course we all know is probably most likely impossible, no matter how many times Johnson repeats this phrase, oven-ready Brexit deal. Like these just baby words. What does that even mean? Right? Oh, it's oven ready. What does that even mean?
Weren't they supposed to leave on the 31st?
Well, I mean, he keeps changing it all the time. I mean, it was 31st of October, and then he moved it to 31st of January, and then he kind of like changed it and said, oh no, by Christmas, that apparently you'll be experiencing Brexit when you're having your dinner on Christmas Day. Apparently, that's what he said. This makes no sense. How many days are there until Christmas Day? So this is absolutely ridiculous. On the NHS, Johnson 38, Corbyn 55, meaning that the viewers recognise that Jeremy Corbyn seems to actually care about the NHS a little bit more than Boris Johnson does, at least in terms of the rhetoric going on. However, then on government spending, Johnson 48, Corbyn 43. So they trust Boris Johnson on the spending which will be insufficient to fund the NHS, while simultaneously trusting Corbyn on the running of the NHS, which would require the more funding, which they are unwilling to vote for because they think that Johnson is winning the debate. So again, this is one of those logical disconnects where it's kind of like they want an NHS, but they also don't want to have billionaires pay money to maintain that system, even though actually they claim they do want to have billionaires be taxed. They also simultaneously don't want them to be taxed because you can't even think it through.
Well, because they might be a billionaire one day. That's
Maybe.
why.
Who knows? And then, of course, obviously, the security anti-terrorism, which is Johnson on 55 and Corbyn on 34. This is the most remarkable one in that BBC debate because of the fact that Johnson and Corbyn, roughly speaking, made the same talking point. Some people may react with shock to this, but as far as I recall, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, Corbyn spoke first and basically laid out his position, which is that he supports rehabilitation of people who have done these things which are bad, and if it is not possible to rehabilitate them, then it should be possible for the judges to basically keep them under the lock and key. This makes logical sense. Johnson then came in, even though it was technically, quote, his fault that this problem existed in the first place, given that he had 9 years to fix it and did nothing. or perhaps we should say his party had 9 years to fix it and did nothing. He then came in and basically echoed the same talking point, except when Johnson says it, it's 55%, but if Corbyn says it, it's 34.
Strange.
So yeah, I thought that fourth one was really amazing because, I mean, the rhetoric was not even substantially different. It's just that depending on whose mouth is uttering it, you get a different result. Because they don't actually disagree with each other on this point. I suppose you could say the only point of disagreement is whether Johnson will actually do the things that is coming out of his mouth, because obviously Johnson could just be lying, given that he's had 9 years to do the thing he's now claiming he wants to do, but he didn't do it the 9 years previously. Whereas obviously Corbyn had no opportunity to enact the thing that he says he wants to do because he wasn't even in government. But for some reason, the British public believes Johnson more than Corbyn, despite the fact that Johnson has been there for 9 years and has not done the thing that he claims he wants to do. So I don't even know what to say. We go on to more statistics. So you're actually giving me some more statistics here. So I'm just going to quickly...
Romeo is the best statistic ever.
He genuinely is, though. Yeah.
Didn't he claim that he was against austerity the whole time?
I hadn't heard him actually say it, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's going to actually claim that. Even though, I mean...
Let me look it up. Hold on.
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously he was not against austerity, but it would be funny if he's going to claim now that he was. Okay, in the meantime, while that's happening, so YouGov ST poll shows Labour voters turning on Corbyn, wanting him to quit if he doesn't get to number 10. So apparently, this is Tim Shipman who's quoting this. He should resign if Labour loses seats. Yes, 57%, no, 25. If Labour gains seats but is not in government, yes, 42, no, 41. So that's almost an even split there. Or if Labour is the largest party and forms a minority government, yes, 19, no, 68. Now, I think that one is the most remarkable one. Like, what kind of people are there in the Labour Party who think that he should resign even if he wins, but forms a minority government? It's kind of like he's held to a standard which is greater than the standard that they would hold Conservatives to on this issue, isn't it?
Yes.
Yep.
Because, I mean, even when you win, you're still asked to resign, which is quite amazing.
Yes, I want you to resign right now. This is Bolivia.
It's just like... like, I mean, it should give you an idea of just how difficult things are for Jeremy Corbyn on this issue. No matter what he does. Okay, voting intention by class. Oh, this one is really good. I'm just going to bring this up as well. Thank you again for this, Romeo. You're doing very well. And you have some...
And we just want to remind you that you're sexy.
I actually don't understand these classes, so maybe you can explain it to us?
Yep, I will be able to explain it. I mean, hopefully.
Can I make background music when there's sounds like Jeopardy, like do?
No.
Oh.
Okay, so we're sharing this next set of stuff. Here we go. So, Matthew Goodwin on Twitter here as well. I mean, Twitter is really amazing for the amount of stuff that we're actually sourcing from Twitter in this particular stream. Like, almost everything that we put up on screen has actually been on Twitter. But anyway, we go on. So, voting intention by class, ABC 1. Now, of course, this is, I think, in American parlance, you know, these would be like upper middle class. Yeah? And middle class. So, they've only divided it into two, really. So, yeah, middle class and upper middle class would be ABC 1. So, Conservative 40%, Labour 33, Lib Dem 15, SNP 5, Green 4, Brexit Party 3. And then when we scroll down, C2DE, which is basically the rest of society below that point, Conservative 44%, Labour 34%, Lib Dem 8%, Brexit Party 4, Green 4, SNP 4. And that was on the 2nd to the 3rd of December. So that was before the debate took place. Not that it makes a difference, because I think we all know that nothing really shifted after the debate anyway. So, yeah, I'm sure that obviously from your perspective, Harry, you'd be ripping your hair out at these numbers because...
Yeah, it reminds me of Singh over in the Canada election. Like, literally, he, like, somehow dropped and Trudeau just flew up despite being a racist and, like, totally...
And appearing in blackface.
Yeah, but you should know, like, besides the blackface, honestly, I get the anger for that and stuff, but, like, on a more serious note, he's in, like, I believe some kind of deal with, quote-unquote, just China with the pipeline that is killing the indigenous where we live. Well, one of the reasons, and, like, literally,
Exactly.
they cannot break the pipeline deal or China can take them to international court, I believe.
Wow.
It's like a written contract. So basically, China and Canada have agreed to kill the indigenous for profit.
Which is, true. Oh, and here's the ethnicity stuff as well. So I'm going to bring up the ethnicity data as well. So I think we've reached just about the end of the line here.
It's a thread, by the way.
And it's a whole thread, yeah. So I'm going to go through the whole thing if I possibly can. So just give me 1 second while I also get that on. And also, I just want to comment before I put that up. I think this evening, given that this was like the test stream to make sure that all of our systems are working the way they're supposed to, compared to the last 2 failures we had earlier on, I think this one has actually been working out pretty well. So what I've done now is obviously more stable than what we were doing in the past. So bringing that up as well. Here we are. So voting intention by ethnicity according to opinion research. So I'm sure you all can look at it. I'll give you guys a chance to like read what you see on screen rather than me just sort of preemptively reading everything out to you. So first of all, Pakistani/Bangladeshi. So Conservative 5%, Labour 83% with no change, Liberal Democrats 10%, positive 7. So clearly, I mean, you can just look at the pluses and minuses here. So Conservatives have lost 8% among that community since 2 years ago, and Liberal Democrats have gained +7, and Labour have been on 83% with no change. So clearly what we can see here is that Liberal Democrats have taken votes from Conservatives for people who are Pakistani or Bangladeshi, and Labour still has 83% of their vote with no change at all. Continuing on. Next up, voting intention of Indian voters. So Conservatives on 36%, -14. Labour on 43% with no change, and Liberal Democrats on 16% with +14. So in this particular case, Indian voters were more likely to vote Conservative than their Pakistani counterparts, but since 2017, that has declined by a full 14%, and all of that has been basically taken by Liberal Democrats, whereas Indian Labour voters were on 43% and have had no change whatsoever. So anyone who wanted to vote for Labour 2 years ago who was Indian seems to apparently be totally willing to do that exact same thing once again. And continuing to read from Ian Warren here, he says that he would add that the comparison with 2017 comes from opinion research tables. They asked the same panel how they voted in 2017. Runnymede Trust, for example, had Labour winning the Indian vote in 2017, though with the Conservatives rising. Next up, the Black African vote. So Conservatives, 19%, down by -4 from 2017. Labour on 65%, so that's with +2. Liberal Democrats 7% on +6, and Brexit Party 9%, +9. So in other words, there are some African people who are voting for a right-wing party, Brexit Party, for the first time ever, because obviously if Brexit Party's on 9% but +9, it meant that there were 0 2 years ago. But that's also because that party never even existed back then. Right, so that's extremely lopsided as well, because I mean, Conservatives are only on 19% there, and I don't see a path for them ever increasing that. So, continuing on down, Afro-Caribbean vote. So
This one's interesting.
Conservatives there on 30%, +3, so they have actually gained slightly. Labour on 48%, -14, so Labour's actually lost 14% since 2 years ago among Afro-Caribbean people for some reason. And then there's Lib Dems on 22%, +17. So that's a lot of wild movement that's actually going on there. Were you able to decode why you think that could be happening?
I don't know yet.
Yeah, because I mean that seems a little counterintuitive to me as well.
A lot of statistics have the Afro-Caribbean vote as being generally under the African vote, which could skew things.
Exactly. Whereas in this case, they have wisely actually split the two groups apart. Now, of course, in terms of the number of people we're talking about here, just in case those in the audience may be wondering, each one of those two groups, is 1.5% of the population. So the Black African vote is 1.5% of the population. Afro-Caribbean vote is 1.5% of the population, and then between Pakistani, Bangladeshi, and Indian, if you include them all under the South Asian bracket, that would be, I think, about 11% of the population, which brings you to a total of roughly 14 point something percent of the United Kingdom. And then, of course, the remaining 84% of people is basically just like British people who are listing themselves as white British or some other kind of European group. But anyway, we go on. And finally, mixed ethnicity. Now, of course, there are hardly any of that particular group in the United Kingdom either. I think that group, and I'm just pulling from the top of my head based on the 2011 census, I think that is 1.8% of people or something like this. So for people of mixed ethnicity, that is Conservatives 18% -9, Labour 50% -3, Lib Dems 21% +16. So, I mean, the obvious takeaway from this is that in general, people from ethnic minority backgrounds don't seem to be very keen on right-wing parties at all. And since 2017, there have been some shifts and movements based on actions taken by these parties, but in no instance, with the exception of Afro-Caribbean voters who are lost 14%, in no instance other than that one have Labour seen their numbers erode.
Could Afro-Caribbeans be older?
Yes.
No, that they could be just older than the general African.
Oh, yeah, yes, of course, yes. That does, as far as I'm aware, that does seem to actually be the case. So, I mean, you guessed it. That's probably an explanation for it, because the Afro-Caribbean groups in the United Kingdom have a sort of a wider number of generations among them.
Can I interrupt momentarily?
Yeah, go ahead.
You might have an additional guest that wants on. Is it too late?
Okay. Well, I mean, we're literally almost to the end of the stream. But yeah, I mean, send them in my direction. I guess we should find out who is the guest that we're talking about.
Oh, it's our good friend Frederick.
Oh, he is way too late to come on now at this point. He should have announced. Yeah, he should have announced at the beginning when we were actually listing who would be on.
You heard it.
All he's gonna do is come in. It's gonna be like 3 to 5 minutes remaining. So no, we can't invite people on at this point. It's way too late down in the stream for that. All right, and here's the last article. Has Boris Johnson really been opposed to austerity since 2010? So I'm just going to load this up as well. I mean, Romeo, you've done really well on this because of the fact that you have provided a number of sources here, which we didn't have. So I'm just going to quickly speed read through it. Yeah, I see what's going on here. Okay, right. So we're going to go through this because I think this sort of really illustrates where the election is going to end up. So, oh look, and they've got exactly the right picture of that needs to be on this article as well. So we're just going to do that now as well. So if you all just hold on 1 second, we'll make that into a reality. Right. So we're going to share this article. Ready, steady, go. Right, so this is from The Guardian, and this appears to be the mobile version of the article because I just opened it as is, which is fine because actually it looks kind of nice on screen when it's this big. So, has Boris Johnson really been opposed to austerity since 2010? He warned against cuts in London when he was mayor, but has consistently voted in support of austerity policies. Yeah, don't you hate it when they have in the byline like the spoiler for how it's going to end? But yeah, so we go on down, and this article was of course published on the 28th of November 2019. So claim. In an interview with The Spectator, Boris Johnson says the past 9 years of austerity is not what he would have done, adding, quote, I remember having conversations with colleagues in the government that came in 2010 saying I thought austerity was not the right way forward for the UK. Background. After the financial crisis and the recession that followed, the Conservative-led coalition government of David Cameron implemented a programme of extensive spending cuts in an attempt to reduce the UK's budget deficit, the annual shortfall between tax income and government spending. Now, of course, just for some background behind the background, let's not forget that when David Cameron relied on George Osborne to make the decision on how these cuts would be implemented, he used that infamous spreadsheet, the austerity spreadsheet, because I'm sure you all remember, where it turned out they'd actually filled in the columns on the spreadsheet incorrectly. And the way they had filled in these columns incorrectly just so happened to produce a result which would lead to them coming to the conclusion that they need to cut even harder. I know, it's an amazing coincidence, isn't it? But anyway,
I'm
we go on.
speechless.
I know. And then they later admitted that the spreadsheet was actually incorrectly set up. And then they resolved themselves to continue to do what they were doing, despite the fact that their figures were known to be false. But more on that some other time. Perhaps one day we need to have a whole live stream on how the whole of this austerity thing kicked off and what the reasoning behind it was. See, I'm actually using English idioms now. Who says kicked off, right? See,
I say kick top daily. Gosh.
yeah, it's one of those things where over time we have the capacity
Along with
to learn
moon
how to speak
shoes.
like they do. But anyway, we continue. Once inflation is taken into account, the Resolution Foundation think tank calculates that day-to-day departmental spending fell by £32 billion between 2010 to 11 and 2017 to 18, from £334 billion to £302 billion. Figures released last year by the House of Commons Library revealed that £37 billion was on course to be sliced off the welfare budget by 2021, a 25% reduction in real terms since 2010. Johnson's pledge to raise public spending has been framed as an attempt to end the past decade of austerity. Reality. I know reality is so painful to anything that Conservatives say in this election. But we go on. Johnson had no direct hand in government policy at the start of the 2010 austerity drive, as he was mayor of London and did not sit as an MP. But as a leading figure in the Conservative Party, he made several interventions on national issues, including austerity. Writing in the Telegraph in 2010, he said the government should, quote, bear down on wasteful public spending to manage the deficit. While urging caution to avoid a double-dip recession, he added, quote, some pain is inevitable. However, he publicly clashed with Cameron on spending cuts, viewed in context as Johnson seeking a second mayoral term and to position himself as a rival to Cameron. He warned against cuts to transport infrastructure in London and attacked policing cuts during the 2011 London riots. He warned benefit cuts could cause Kosovo-style social cleansing of London, through Johnson's office distanced himself from his comment after it drew criticism. Quote, my consistent position has been that the government is absolutely right to reform the housing benefit system, which has become completely unsustainable, he said. Since returning as an MP in 2015, Johnson has consistently voted in support of austerity policies, according to the They Work For You website. He has almost always voted for a reduction in spending on welfare benefits, including a vote in 2016 in favour of reductions to the work allowance element of universal credit and reductions to employment and support allowance. He consistently voted for reducing central government funding for local authorities, including most recently to vote to set the main central government grant for 2018 to 2019 as a level 56% lower than it was set for 2017 to 18. Looking ahead to Johnson's position on austerity, he is now Prime Minister, according to the Institute for Fiscal Studies. The 2019 Conservative Manifesto would leave public service spending outside of health still 14% lower in 2023 to 24 than it was in 2010 to 11, adding, quote, no more austerity perhaps, but an awful lot of it baked in. Verdict. Johnson did speak out against austerity while London mayor at the inception of austerity, though this could be viewed as him vying for more personal power. In Parliament, he has voted in favour of austerity policies, while his party delivered lasting cuts in government. So, there's that.
This is a lot to absorb.
Well, I mean, not really. I mean, all it's basically saying.
I mean, if you don't know anything, this is a lot.
I agree. I have to second horror.
Okay, well, okay, in supreme summary, all it is basically is that Johnson made some noises at the beginning saying that you shouldn't enact cuts against social services so hard because it would result in calamity. He said this because this would make him more popular because he was in London at the time amongst a demographic that would have appreciated him saying those words, although at that time he had no power to do anything about it, and therefore it was a luxury for him to be able to say things that he didn't have to act on. When he was actually given the ability to have a meaningful position in government at Westminster in 2015 and to opine again on these issues, he then supported austerity and the cuts, basically. And his currently existing manifesto does nothing to reverse that scenario. It just simply stops enacting further cuts, but maintains the existing cuts that were baked in during his previous existence as an MP. So for anyone who's sort of reading through to try to figure out where Boris Johnson stands on this, it should be abundantly obvious that if Boris Johnson claims that he is against austerity, this is in fact a lie.
So he is for austerity.
Of course.
Okay, simple enough.
I mean, and also, I mean, this is one of those things where intuitively, he's a member of the Conservative Party. I mean, did you have to ask? There are very few Conservatives who weren't in favor of austerity.
No, I didn't need to ask. It's just doesn't hurt to.
No, I don't mean you personally, obviously, but I mean to the wider public in general. Because I mean, obviously, you got it after I explained it. But I mean, to the wider public at large, it's one of those things where Boris Johnson is basically just gaslighting people by claiming that he didn't do a thing that he in fact did.
He just wants to watch the world burn.
It's one of those things where you can actually call this the gaslighting election. Because a lot of what Boris Johnson has done has just been bald-facedly lying to cameras. Now, let's just quickly cover some of these bald-faced lies. So, for example, this thing with the 50,000 nurses he says he's going to bring back. Now, I just wanted to touch on that. These 50,000 nurses, apparently 19,000 of them already exist, meaning there's actually 31,000 that he'd be bringing in. Okay? Now, just to show how pathological these lies are, despite the fact that this number got exposed early as not actually being 50,000, the Conservative Party campaign decided that since the number 50,000 sounds so magical and nice, that they decided they were going to continue to utter the phrase 50,000 more nurses, despite the fact that it's actually 31,000, because the term 50,000 sounds sexier than 31,000. That's how pathological it is. This is why in every single interview, whenever he is asked how many new nurses, they respond 50,000, even though literally that is not the number, and they admit that that's not the actual number. They just like saying 50,000 because it sounds nice, by their own admission. Okay, so more stuff that's absolutely pathological. There was another number they had that they kept throwing around where it was just a complete ridiculous. Oh yes, 40 new hospitals. That was the other one. Where every single time you ask Boris Johnson about NHS spending, he'd say 40 new hospitals. Turns out that number 40, yeah, by 40, they mean actually 6.
Now,
they're
only 34 off.
Yeah, I mean, they're only off by 34. And so, you look at it and then you realize how they've managed to actually arrive at the number 40. They've done it by using some strange turns of phrases to define what qualifies as a new hospital versus what is not a new hospital. And so if you were to read out the full sentence, you could come to a conclusion that, okay, yes, we can understand why the number 40 is being used there, because it involves some renovations on existing hospitals and some other things that they're engaged in, and perhaps some spending on existing hospitals. But that's not what a new hospital is. And so, yeah. And then when you get down to like 40 that actually means 6, the 6 that they actually mean is not even actually like 6 concrete hospitals that you can actually put your physical hands on when they're finished being constructed. The 6 is like a sort of like a prospectus to find out whether there would be a space to have 6. So it's kind of one of those things where they say 40, but they mean 6, which could hypothetically actually mean 0.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, this is how the Conservative Party is running a campaign. 40, which means 6, but could hypothetically be 0.
I'm gonna
Those are
send
the kind
you
of
a
numbers we're
link.
talking about. And these are the guys who then turn around and claim that, the Labour Party has not sufficiently given descriptions of how they're going to implement their plans. But in fact, the Labour Party have issued 2 books. The first one being obviously the red book, which you see everyone walking around with, and the second one being the grey book, which fewer people have read, but which apparently contains the list of things they want to do along with the costings and another column next to it, and then it adds up, and they have all these figures, right? So the level of standards which people are held to are completely different, because Labour is consistently asked to explain and or justify the contents of the red or the grey book, whereas Boris Johnson can just get out there and say 40 that means 6 that could hypothetically be 0, and everyone's like, yeah, that's normal. It's just normal for a guy to look you dead in the face through the camera and just say things that are wholly untrue all the time.
LOL. Ray, I'm gonna send you a link. I don't really know if it's relevant or not, but I'm sending it.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to take a look. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at what you're showing me here. Unfortunately, I can't show video. Oh, yes. You're showing me the Boris Johnson being torn apart for closing 800 youth centres and 1,000 Sure Start centres. Right. So, yes, this one was pretty funny. I mean, sadly, I cannot show the video because we don't have that facility set up yet, but we'll get there. But basically, you guys just need to look for it. It's on the Tory Fibs Twitter account, and if you basically just search for the phrase Boris Johnson torn apart for closing 800 youth centres, it will come up as your top tweet. So, yeah. So a journalist comes in and begins asking Boris Johnson questions, and he begins putting out completely nonsensical figures, and then she corrects him on all of them. And you can see through the saccharine smile that Johnson is sort of painting onto his own face, that he's actually genuinely angry about the fact that the interviewer will not allow him to just lie. In fact, at some point during that conversation, Boris Johnson tells her that it's unfair that she is not permitting him to just invent his own numbers.
I thought that was pretty crazy goddamn news.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally crazy. And then again, consider. Boris Johnson is popular, but Jeremy Corbyn is the most is apparently, according to the
He's
figures, the
evil
most
because he wants to
unpopular
help
in history.
people. He's also anti-Semitist because he's against Palestine being fucking colonized by Israel imperialists.
It's so bizarre. And so when you look at this whole scenario, you just wonder how it's going to play out. So we're coming down to the to the end of the line. Today's date is the 8th of December 2019. And so, I mean, the election is how many days away is that? That's 4 days away, am I right?
Thursday.
Yeah. So it's basically 4 days away. People have a choice to make. This is one of the most consequential elections in a generation. And it comes down to which route we're going to go. Is the United Kingdom going to basically vote Jeremy Corbyn in through electing the Labour Party, voting for Labour in all of the the places where Labour is capable of winning, thus producing a Labour government and allowing them to implement the social policies which they have in mind? Or are we going to go the other route, which is people end up supporting Boris Johnson because they could imagine drinking a beer with him, and then Boris Johnson gets in and begins laughing immediately at the idiotic schmucks who have let him through, and then begins doing the kind of policies which are not advantageous for the working class. And then the working class, being hurt by these ridiculous policies that Boris Johnson would implement, will then be looking for scapegoats. And of course, scapegoats will be ethnic minorities perhaps such as myself. And we'll be dealing with this nonsense again, which is, working class voters voting against their own interests and then refusing to blame themselves and their own choices for the outcome, and instead deciding to scapegoat ethnic minority groups. And so this is why, it's part of the reason why, or one of the more self-interested reasons as to why I have been advocating so vehemently for people to choose Labour at this particular election. It's because everything is
Oh.
here.
Okay, I guess I'll vote Labour now.
Yeah, we don't have to go through this same old pattern once again. I mean, obviously, for someone like in your case, you would have voted Labour regardless if you were British.
Oh, I would have. I voted the New Democratic Party, and not because I base people on how left or right they are, but I literally listen to what they're saying and consider it, by itself. And Singh was like, "Fuck the pipeline, save the indigenous. The indigenous, deserve their own preserved sacred land where they can have their own shit going on." You know what I mean? And of course, all the white Canadians were like, "Ew, I'd rather vote for a guy who did blackface." So there you have it. If the fucking elections aren't rigged, then Canadians are extremely dumb.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things where I don't know how. I mean, the electorate is going to have to grow up at some point. It could also be that there's a lack of free time, and we just want to talk about that as well, just before we go, because obviously we've been running for quite a long time, so I don't want to keep people here for too long. So one of the other policies which the Labour Party have been putting forward, which I thought was a very great one, is something called the 4-day work week. So the idea behind this is that since increases in productivity through automation have been, and obviously information technology systems have been so dramatic over the past 20 years, it should be appropriate at this point for a reduction of labor hours to occur. So obviously this is a position which many people on the left have held for quite a long time. And so their proposition is that for non-essential services, because obviously this would not apply to things like the National Health Service or the fire department or anything like this, obviously, because these things need to be working 24/7, 365. But for things other than the things which you need in order to survive, these things should be able to operate on 4-day work weeks. And by 4-day work weeks, they don't mean Monday to Thursday. What they mean by this is that rather than having the number of hours being equivalent to 5 days, you'd have the number of hours as your upper limit being equivalent to 4 days. So hypothetically, a person could work for 5 individual days, but with a shorter work day. Does that make sense? Like, there are many ways for you to save your time. You could spread the 4 days.
People are no work. No, abolish work.
Well, you can't literally get to that point yet. But what I'm saying, is that when you have the 4-day work week was something that only Labour was supporting, or is supporting, I should say, present tense, is supporting at this election. And people have been largely trying to misinterpret it and laugh at it and so on. But actually, it's quite a serious thing, because think about it this way: if people actually had that free time, they would probably have been able to actually engage with politics better and be more informed. Because a lot of the people probably who are making these silly decisions that don't make any sense are people who are so busy doing other things in their drudgery that they don't have time to actually pay attention to the political situation that's unfolding around them. And so what we need is reduction of labor hours.
Wake up, boys.
I mean, there's just so many things going on at this election, and people need to make the choice now. I don't think this is something that doesn't happen very often. Once in a generation opportunity. 4 days remaining, and austerity has been going on since, well, for about 8 to 9 years now. Austerity has been going on, and it's kind of like, we're just looking at the electorate, and the electorate's just looking back at us, and we're saying, you still haven't fixed it yet. Believe in yourself. Believe in your strengths. And with that,
Whoa,
I guess we'll
that's deep. That's fucking deep.
I agree, it's very deep.
It's like Fern Gully shit. Like, I want to save the planet now from Boris.
I am a Princess Mononoke type person.
Okay, okay, fair. That's more badass.
I do like Fern Gully though, so I can't fault it. I
came
just
in
like
clutch because my battery was about to die.
Well, luckily we have actually reached the end of the stream, so your battery is dying just at the right time. So we'll see you all the next time we have a live stream. That might be between that might be at any point between now and the election, because with only a short number of days remaining, we might actually try to do one live stream every single day before the actual day itself. So depends on a few factors. We'll try to deliver that for you. So if everyone else has got nothing else to add to this, we'll call it a wrap here.
I just want to say, follow me on Twitter or you're fascist. Thank you.
Oh yeah, of course. There's obviously promotions that need to be done. So yes, all of the people who are here, you should obviously find us on Twitter, give us a follow. If you like the kind of live streams we're doing here, and obviously we will endeavor to improve over time. And if you like what we're doing here, smash that like and subscribe button. We'll see you later on.
Or else.